Hi groupies, this is Mark from Groupable, and we have our first Groupable live session where we had a guest on, an expert, someone to share their knowledge and help us improve our groups and our organizations. Today we have an interview with Adam Hathaway, who is past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge in New Mexico, and he tells the story about how MASONICon became the multi-track educational event, annual event for the Grand Lodge, New Mexico. How that came about, what they do, and most importantly, how they've benefited from it and how we could take some of these ideas and turn them into events for our own organizations so that we can help improve our organizations. And what do those do? Help improve member engagement, help improve the operations of your locals, spread knowledge, also have that great hallway track where people meet from all over your organization, whether you're a state or nationwide organization. So you bring everybody together so you can really have this bonding, learning, interesting, fun, and really just rewarding event. I've been to a couple of MASONICons in New Mexico. I live in upstate New York. I've gone out for them. They're really great events. They do a great event, and now we've got the experts in to learn from the best. So look forward to more of these. We're going to be having more guests on our Groupable live sessions, and we're going to be releasing these on YouTube for people to see. And a lot of knowledge and learning is going to be shared over the next year. Take care. Enjoy the video. Okay, good evening. This is Mark from Groupable, and we're here for our Groupable live session. This is a first time we're doing this format where we've got a guest on to do some question and answer, share some knowledge and information from their experience. We've got with us tonight Adam Hathaway, who is a past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Mexico. And we're going to be talking about MASONICon tonight. And MASONICon is well, you know what? I think we'll just actually punt it right over to Adam and get the whole thing started. And I just want to, first of all, acknowledge my co-host. We got Mark DeVitt on with me tonight and Silva, and we're going to be going through this and hopefully have a great conversation here. So Adam, what is MASONICon? Where did the idea come from? What's it all about?
So MASONICon is the annual educational conference for the Grand Lodge of New Mexico. And in a way, it sort of started accidentally. What we were having for a very long time in New Mexico was something called the Wardens Conference. And I know that there was a Wardens Conference model that was used across the country as well. And I went to the last one in New Mexico, which was in 2007. And it had fairly low attendance, and it was the last one. They kind of gave up. And it was a single track model. At 9 o'clock, you were going to be told how to put together a lodge budget. At 10 o'clock, you were told how to promote new people coming into Masonry. It was like that. It was a take it or leave it. It was about 5 classes in the one day. And that was in 2008, and that was it. So flash forward now several years to 2013, where the chair of our long-range planning committee called me up 3 days before their meeting and said, Adam, I'm in so much trouble. I'm supposed to put together a long-range plan, and I don't know anything about this. What am I going to do? And I said, well, I know a little bit about a long-range plan. Let me take the old one, the PowerPoint, and I'll spruce it up, and then you can do whatever you want to. So I figured that since he was going to do whatever he wanted once I gave it to him, I did whatever I wanted, knowing he would fix it. And I said, hey, let's have an educational conference. That was one of the goals. And I said, let's make it a multi-track. Instead of single, let's have many tracks at one time. So whenever a brother shows up, he would have 5 or 6 or 7 choices for every single hour. Oh, I'm going to need a holding name for this thing. Okay, fine. I'll call it MASONICon. Kids are talking about cons these days. Everything has a con. So we'll call it MASONICon, and I'm sure that they'll come up with a better name later. And I emailed him this long-range plan, which included this idea for a multi-pronged, multi-approach educational conference. And 20 minutes later, he wrote back and says, sounds great, we'll use it. And so he didn't modify it at all. And then at the meeting on Saturday,
and the name stuck.
The name stuck. And the deputy grand master said, Okay, do it. You're in charge of MASONICon for next year. Make it happen. So that's why our MASONICon, by the way, the first MASONICon, was in 2014.
Okay. And now, were you in the Grand Line at that point?
Yes, I think
Okay.
I had just come in. I was either junior Grand Deacon or senior Grand Deacon.
Okay. So you were in the line. So you got a pretty good influence over your line really early by having MasonicCon kind of be your baby.
Everybody was really receptive to the idea. It was a much easier sell. It had been, what, 5 years since we had had any kind of educational conference promoted by the Grand Lodge of New Mexico. So I think it was something that the brethren were hungry for and that the officers were very supportive of.
Interesting. So so you talked about the Wardens event that was kind of the model of the training. But in general, what other things set MasonicCon as an event apart and different from your typical Masonic event?
Well, first off, one of the things that struck me when I went to the last Wardens Conference was people were saying, and they were saying it with a straight face, they were very, very serious. They were concerned about the low numbers, and they said they actually uttered this phrase: how come we're only getting wardens coming to the Wardens Conference? How come none of the deacons are coming to the Wardens Conference? And I was a deacon
Mhm.
of my lodge at that time, in with that year 2007 2008, and I went because the master of my lodge invited me, and we drove the 5 hours to go. So that was the one thing: was what can we do that will be the most appealable to the largest variety of Masons in New Mexico? So yes, we need to make sure that there's leadership training, that there's actual how to manage your lodge training, but not everyone's going to be into that. So by having a restrictive set of classes, what that means is you're restricting attendance. So
Okay.
that's why that multiple track approach was the hallmark. The other thing that we did that was a little different was we made the event free. And
Yes, I
a
remember.
lot of
Yes.
folks, yeah, and a lot of folks will be tempted. You get these temptations throughout the year, since we've been doing it now every single year since 2014. One of the ideas is, oh, Adam, just charge $5. Nobody will care. While that may be true, there is value in saying, we, your Grand Lodge officers, value this training so much that we will make it as affordable to you as humanly possible. Also recognizing that guys were traveling from all across the state and there's expenses incurred there. So if the Grand Lodge assumed those costs in the annual budget, then that would be
Mhm.
pennies per attendee instead of 5 or 10 or $20 per member.
Now, I have to disclose that I have been to the New Mexico MasonicCon twice now. I had maybe three times, but definitely twice. I've attended I know definitely 2018 and 2019. I you I would I you know I went out, I did the secretary training because everybody's got to have some secretary training, and if you're going to have somebody train secretaries, I guess I'm the guy to do that. And so I went out and did that. But every year I've been out, I noticed a couple things about it. One year you had somewhere there making t-shirts that had made a MasonicCon t-shirt. And that is the first event I had ever been to for the Masons that had a t-shirt for the event. Unfortunately, I was at the Prince Hall Conference for the Midwest this past weekend. My laundry's in a complete chaos. I was going to put the shirt on tonight. I can't find it at the moment. But it's the first place I ever went, t-shirt for a Masonic event. The other thing I noticed is that it's casual. It's business casual. And is that something that you actually made a conscious effort? Not a lot of introductions. I noticed it's like, let's get together in the morning. do a little talk, get some idea about what the tracks are, and then you kind of sent people off. Was that a conscious decision?
It was. There was a lot of conscious decisions made from tip to start, of course, in consultation with the Grand Master and what he wanted. So, of course, we began with a prayer. Of course, we began with words from the Grand Master. When the Grand Master of Prince Hall would come, we made sure he got recognized. No one else did. But our Grand Master, and of course the Prince Hall Grand Master, because New Mexico has an excellent relationship, so their members would also attend. And when I went to them and plugged it, I said, "This is an event for all Masons in New Mexico, so please come." And all of those were very conscious decisions. If I can, I'll go ahead and I will bring up what I see as the roadmap to MASONICon, this multi-pronged approach. So if you notice, it was 8 o'clock. We've got coffee and donuts because an army travels on its stomach. 9 o'clock, opening remarks, half hour. So like you said, we did not open ceremonially. We did open with a prayer. The Grand Master did give us some inspiring remarks every year. And then whoever was running the event that year talked about a little house cleaning, whatever was necessary for the administration of the day. And then here we go. Now, if you look, part of the deliberate decisions we made, if you look at the 9:30, the first hour, if you look 3 blocks in and count 4 blocks over, they are all about the officers meeting with their grand counterparts. So
interesting.
So for block number 3, counting from the left, you've got worshipful masters meeting with the Grand Master. Then you've got senior wardens meeting with the deputy Grand Master, and then so on. So the overarching long-range view on that was these are the people who will be chairing their year together. And so by going to MASONICon together year after year, by the time they all reach their respective Easts, Grand Master,
they got there together.
Masters, they had planned their year together. And that was something very deliberately that we were trying to do, because we didn't sense that we were planning our year together, that as you were progressing up the grand line, that you were coordinating with everybody else who was progressing up their line. So that's how we kicked it off, very deliberately, but keeping with the philosophy of not everybody's into that. So what am I going to do if I'm not an officer? Well, great. You've got, like, over on the left, you've got 2 classes, Masonic Ed, the technical side, and then what to do as a volunteer. So you're not an officer, so what? And then here's a fun thing we did. Slide all the way over to the right.
I noticed that. I wanted to bring that attention to that, because that was there, I believe, in 18 and 19 when I was there, and talk about that. The reason for the track all the way on the right.
That track all the way on the right, if you notice, it says at the top, non-Mason track. We wanted MASONICon to be able to appeal to the non-Mason. We wanted to use it as a recruitment tool. So we actually advertised in the newspaper. Have questions about Masonry? Come to MASONICon. And so we actually had Masons stationed at the door to catch anybody they didn't know and escort them the rest of the day.
Oh, really?
You know, the practical application is we were a little concerned about security. We didn't want anybody just wandering around the shrine. So the escort had a very practical purpose, but it also had the idea of this was your Mason, and your Mason is now going to hang out with you today, take you to registration, get your contact information, bring you to one of our classes that we had. It was actually one of the Grand Master's idea. He wanted to have he wanted to have 2. There was a new Mason orientation that he wanted to host for Masons who'd been less than 1 year.
Yep, I see that.
And he also wanted an hour with the non-Masons who didn't know what was going on, so that we could talk to them and we could give them an introduction. Now, we did not do that the first year. It was one of those things that developed over time. You know you have a growing, successful event when things change and the organizers have nothing to do with it. So, for example, you mentioned the t-shirts.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be a great thing if one of us had thought of it. We didn't. One of the merchants just on his own decided to do it. So when
Yes.
your members feel like, well, why don't I just do something? What can I contribute? What is my, when people are feeling empowered to participate, that's when you know you've got something going on.
Yep. And I do remember that specifically, that vendor was a member, but he took it upon himself to design the t-shirt and showed up with his press and thing and just did them right there on site, right for you. And so it was good for him and it was good for the event. And I remember in 18 and 19 that in the non-Masonic event, I would say that I don't remember the numbers, but there were a noticeable number of non-Masons at the event. I mean, it definitely, and if you have someone who comes out to an event like this, it's not a Mason, they're going to know by the end of it if they want to join.
And there were a number of attendees who were members of the appendant bodies. We made sure that they got invitations too. So it was really great because we had youth running around because the youth groups were coming. They were encouraged to take the classes. We had members of Amaranth, Eastern Star, you name it. And in fact, one of the things that we did to sweeten the pot to encourage them to come was every appendant body that wanted to could set up a membership table right there in the shrine. You could promote your organization to the other members. So again, the whole thing is about what can we do? What can we promote? Make it bigger. The bigger it becomes, the more of a life of its own that it takes on. So for example, take a look at the third column from the left and go down to the 130 and the 230 blocks. So the 130 block was meeting management with Mackey. I'm a professional registered parliamentarian, so I love this stuff. And in New Mexico, we've adopted parliamentary law by Albert Mackey as our parliamentary authority. Well, an hour later, you might be thinking, Robert's Rules of Order. Why would you teach a class on Robert's Rules of Order? That's not a Masonic thing. Well, as it turns out, Robert's Rules of Order is the parliamentary authority for the Shrine, Amaranth,
For some of the other
Eastern
pendant
Star,
bodies.
and all three of the youth groups. And so
Got it.
that year, we had 35 attendees for the Roberts Rules class because we invited the appendant bodies, and the youth to come.
That's great. That's great. Now, just you've mentioned the shrine a few times, and that's the venue you use. I want to kind of pivot a little bit into some of the how-to. Obviously, you've got the multi-track thing, and it takes a facility that can handle that. And you've picked the shrine in Albuquerque, which I don't remember which shrine that is.
Balut Abiad.
Okay. And if you were going to do one of these things, if you're going to hold a MASONICon, do it multi-track, the way you've done it in New Mexico. What are some of the things you want to look for in that facility?
So I agree with you. Whenever anybody's trying to plan an event, the first thing you need to look at is facility, because not only are you looking for a facility to meet your needs, but the facility that you get will also provide a structure to what you're doing because you now have limitations and features. So first off, we have a great relationship with the Shrine. The Shrine will allow Masonic organizations or Masonic events to occur at no charge. So that was really great for the fact that we weren't charging to attend, was a line item in the Grand Lodge budget. So here was a venue that we were getting for free. So of course you need space. So we've got, if you look here, we've got 7 classrooms that we need. So you got to get a little creative. One is the Fez Club, which is the bar. So that was popular. We have a giant ballroom. So we divided it into 2, ballroom A and ballroom B.
Yep. I've been in one of those teaching while another one was going on.
And we also used our giant auditorium as well with a giant screen. So for your venue, space. And what's really great is back in probably about a year before this, a year to two before this, the shrine had upgraded its Wi-Fi capability. It was a new thing for the shrine, and it was one of those things where you've got a generation that's concerned about anything new. We were putting in the new Wi-Fi system, and one of the members said, "Well, can't they hack into our secretary's computer now?" So,
Yes.
so by having that, we were able to have live streaming information that our speakers were using. We were able to download various things and to have live presentations like, this is what the Grand Lodge webpage looks like. This is what Maury looks like. This is how you might want to
And
use it.
and I can tell you in some of the
Interaction.
talks I was in, people were fact checking. They were fact checking the speakers. It was fun. So that's a
So,
little bit about facility, but you've got
well,
seven
I was going to
wide.
say,
Go
yes.
ahead.
I was going to say, with facility, one thing that we knew about making sure there were multiple projectors, equipment.
Yep.
What did the
Yes.
shrine have? We realized that we would need to bring extra extension cords
Yes. Extension cords everywhere.
and food capability. We didn't want people leave to go to lunch. Sometimes they don't come back.
They don't come back.
So we would have food provided on site.
Yep. So 7 tracks by 6 sessions. Minus,
Well,
how did you get all those? And
actually,
I know I'll point that out on the schedule. The yellow ones are repeats. And the reason they did that is those were really important classes, and they wanted to make sure that there was multiple availability to hit those particular sessions. But you basically have about 40 sessions on here. And no secret, New Mexico is not a big jurisdiction. How'd you fill those speaker slots other than flying me in from New York?
well, Mark, I have a surprise for you. You just said that there's 40 classes here.
Yes.
Well, when we at that big brainstorming session we had after the first MASONICon, we said, what would you guys like to see? And we got the greatest compliment you could possibly get. Today was a 1-day. We want a 2-day. So Mark, I'm going to show you the Friday schedule. So we didn't have just 40 classes, which we had on
Right.
Saturday. We also had another 10 here on Friday because the guys wanted more.
Yes.
So, how do we fill it? We did a combination of things. We brought folks from all across the state because that's another tip. If you want people to come from across the state, then have speakers from across the state. And odds are they're going to bring people with them. If they're
Yes.
driving 4 or 5 hours, they're not going to do it alone. And this is kind of a human psychology sort of thing. We respond to what we see in ourselves. So when you're looking at the schedule and the speakers, you're going to be anything familiar to you is going to appeal. So if all the speakers are from Albuquerque and you're from Hobbs, New Mexico, there's less attraction there. So
Right.
we had speakers from all across the state and we had a variety. Some were the people where you'd see a name. I want to hear that guy. That guy was always good. But we also peppered it with guys that we thought were up and coming that nobody knew but would really want to know. So that was kind of our bait and switch, is come for the names you recognize, but then be exposed to the guys you wouldn't know. And of course, that's our super double secret way of training and promoting guys that maybe didn't have a lot of experience presenting.
I was going to say it's a way to really start to build your bench of having more people who are capable of getting up and doing that. That's one thing I on the schedule there. I noticed you had some boxes that were kind of an orange gold. You can leave it off the moment, but those were Sam Friedman, and Sam is my Masonic mentor's son. And as most folks on here know, I'm a New York Mason. This is a New Mexico event. And I believe it was 18 that he was the keynote speaker. and I guess, and he, I don't know if he was there 1 year or 2 years, but talk about what you've done with having a keynote speaker, because we do have that one plenary session. I believe it was at the dinner, and where you kind of brought in one of those big names.
Definitely. So one of the reasons that we have a line item in the budget for MASONICon, because you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, if there's no fee and you're getting the shrine for free, then what is the money in the Grand Lodge budget for? A big chunk was flying in and occasionally paying honoraria for a big name, somebody from another state that the New Mexico brothers wouldn't normally be exposed to. So they'd heard me speak a million times. They've heard others speak a million times. Let's get them a fresh voice as well. So Sam Friedman had published a book, A Million Masons or More. It was a book about targeting millennials to become Freemasons. So we talked to Sam, and so he was our big keynote speaker. We flew him out from New York, and he came, and we had him, like we usually do with our keynotes, is we work them to death, and they're normally happy to do it. They're like, hey, you spent the money to bring us out, work us to death. Yes, sir. So he came and he talked about recruitment approaches from generational perspectives and making sure that we were aware of how to communicate and recruit from the younger generations. And he got really high marks. We brought Most Worshipful Brother Haller in from Kansas one year. We brought people from all over the place. And I got to tell you, it was a little controversial at one of the budget communications. We have a whole meeting just for the budget, where somebody stood up and said, why are we spending all this money to bring a stranger in? We got guys here that can talk. And it's like, yeah, and you've heard them. We need fresh approaches. We need to hear things we don't normally hear. And so the budget line item has always passed, but some guys wanted to know why we didn't go back to the old way of doing things. Why did we have to do this? So yeah, and Sam was great, and he had a good time.
And I'll tell you, I was there for his keynote, and I mean, it was absolutely motivational and insightful. A lot of messaging that we've been doing on the groupable side about that, we have to meet younger members where they are if we want to have younger members. And it was really a remarkable thing. So a little segue. So I've been to some of these, and I've seen some fun times at MASONICon, and you talk about the cross-pollination, and some of that, it brings people in. I have a secretary who I met who now uses our system in Nebraska, and I met him at MASONICon in Albuquerque. And how many people are you getting in from out of state to your event?
That's an interesting question. So before COVID hit, we were
getting pre-pandemic.
Folks,
let's talk pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic, we were getting Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, even that first year. That first year, we were getting folks from Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, Wyoming. We had a few folks I had somebody from California. We had some folks from the East Coast. And again, the more you bring in folks from across, now we're talking about the country, the more chance you're going to have other folks from across the country come. So this year, I'm not running the event. I'm just one of the speakers, but I'm told that our keynote speaker is coming from Oklahoma. So we're really looking forward to the big reveal on that.
Great. Yeah. Why don't you turn off your screen share for a moment? I want to show how this cross-pollination thing really has taken off here in the United States. So give me a second here. And this is kind of as words of encouragement in some ways. This is a website called MasonicConferences.com, and you'll see South Pasadena, Masonic Lodges, MASONICon, MASONICon Chicago, Camp Masonry, Texas MASONICon, Cooperstown MASONICon, and on and on. These are starting to pop up all over the United States now, and MASONICon really has become a national thing. And I mean, so if you're thinking about doing one of these, don't be afraid of it, because this is a really engaging way. And I don't care if you're Blue Lodge Masonry, Eastern Star, Tall Cedars, doesn't really matter what your organization is. There are lessons here that you can learn and really bring an engaging event to your members. So regarding engaging, what's one of the funniest things you've seen at a MASONICon or experienced at a MASONICon?
Well, it's kind of funny. You mentioned before that it's kind of a relaxed atmosphere, right? We're not wearing suits. We're doing kind of the business casual thing. So, but I didn't know what that was. So the very first year I asked the Grandmaster, who was the previous Deputy Grandmaster, who said, do it, do it. And I said, what would you like the attire to be? And he said, no Speedos or flip-flops. And I said, well, most worshipful, I'll check for flip-flops, but I ain't checking for Speedos.
So I'll tell mine, and I don't remember the exact circumstance. I think it was in 2019. I think it might have been a charitable challenge in 2019. It was a charitable challenge, and the Grand Master had his head shaved at the end of the event because we reached the charitable contribution goal for the event. And that has been, I know in 18 and 19, both of them, there was, a charitable goal for the day. And that was definitely part of it. So if you were going to give a piece of advice to someone about, hey, you want to start a MASONICon, what's kind of the starting piece of advice you would give to a group that wants to do a MASONICon?
Where are you and where do you want to be? Fancy terms, we call that gap analysis. But where are you now and where do you want to be? We all sense certain gaps in Freemasonry. That one of the MASONICons and a number of the initiatives in the long range planning committee, when it was my turn to chair, is I would go to all of the regional communications and I would perform an exercise. And I'd go around the room and I'd say, okay, don't answer it right now, but I want you to, in your mind, answer this question. As a Mason, I really wish we had more. And I'd go down the room and everybody would say all kinds of things. Well, those would be some of our ideas for the long range plan, and they'd be some of our ideas for MASONICon. If you sense that we are not fulfilling something that you believe we should, that is part of the meaningful Masonic existence that you pictured when you joined or you desired when you came into leadership positions, then make it happen. Sense the gap. Fill the gap. Use the event to do that. I was noticing that with the previous Wardens Conference format, what we were missing was everybody else besides the wardens. So then it was, how do you answer that question? How do you get them there? As many different focus classes as possible, inviting as many different types of Masons and then members of the Masonic family as possible. And then now you've got more people bringing energy and ideas into it. So no one of us is as smart as all of us. So, when you're saying, well, how do I get started? Pitch your idea and then get more ideas to come in. Having MASONICon go to 2 days, that wasn't my idea. That was their idea. Having classes repeat because there was so much going on. They couldn't even get to everything, which is wonderful. So that was their idea.
Was that something that came from the attendees?
Yes. Oh, that's the other thing that we did too, is every single year pre-pandemic, every person who came in got a packet. And in the packet was a map to the shrine, was the class schedule and all of the little blurbs about it, and feedback forms. And there was a feedback form to fill out for every single class and for the overall event. And the number one feedback we got was more than 1 day. And the second one was repeat the classes because I can't get to everything. And in fact, there were two MASONICons that were poorly attended, like 50 members, which
Mm.
was a small number for us. It was when an organizer said, "Oh, well, we can't go to everything. That's the big complaint we're getting, is there's too much to go to." So they broke the formula. They shrunk the number of tracks to like 4, and the result was less people attended. The following year, we went back to a larger track. Boom, we got back to about 160, 180. So those are the things to kind of look out for and be responsive to your folks. One of the things I've said since 2014 is we know that we always will need a MASONICon. We do not always know what it should look like.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. So you talk about that gap analysis, and as you're talking about, I'm kind of thinking to myself, my whole career of doing Masonic IT and Masonic membership management and web-based management was literally seeing a gap and filling it in Freemasonry. It literally came from that analysis in with a bunch of brothers just saying, okay, and you saw that here, the gap analysis of, well, the Wardens event kind of stopped. We're not having training. Let's try something new. And out of it was born MASONICon. And as we saw, all those places now that hold MASONICons across the United States. And all of their formulas are a little bit different, but I actually have gone and looked at a number of the websites. Most of them are multi-track. And although I will say during the pandemic, those tracks got narrower. But I'm guessing that once the pandemic is over, they're going to start to go wide again, because you'll have more people who are willing to travel and come out and do those things. And so I think going forward, that's going to change. And now, would you suggest start with a 1 day, or do you think try to do 1 day?
I would say start with a 1 day. So definitely start, in my opinion, multi-track, do that, but try a day. Try a day. Keep it easy at first. Try a day. See how it goes. And at the end of that first year, well, we had it for several years, but we had a end of day wrap up session, kind of a round table. And you know how these conferences are, right? By the time 4:00 rolls around, everybody is exhausted, and those last classes don't get attended sometimes. Everybody went to the round table. It was statistically significant, and it literally was a round table. Okay, folks, what'd you like? What should we have done better? What should we never do again? And the only criticisms were the two I mentioned. We want 2 days, and we want repeat classes. So that's the key, is try it and have an opportunity. And if you notice, we had 2 opportunities for feedback. One was in person, the other was written, because different people feel more comfortable communicating in different ways.
Different ways. Yep. So I want to go back to one thing about kind of the logistics of it. And you said, I think it was, our armies don't run on empty or run on their stomachs or something like that. Yep. And that is one thing I noticed the first time I went, is that there was stuff there in the morning. There was a provided lunch, and there was a dinner on Saturday. I don't remember if there was a dinner on Friday or not. I don't remember, but I know there's definitely a dinner on Saturday. And I'm assuming that comes out of the Grand Lodge budget for the event.
Okay, great question. And it leads into something else that is fabulous. So we didn't charge to go to the event, but in order to make budget, we did charge for the lunch and the dinner. We didn't charge for snacks throughout the day, because we know what blood sugar does at 10:30 and 2:40. So we made sure there was stuff to nibble on and coffee all day, and there was food in the morning, like bagel. I prefer bagels or bagels.
I think it was bagels, and I think there might have been some other stuff, but it was light fare.
Right, but one of the things that we did to encourage people to attend the later sessions is we did start serving nachos at about 3 in the afternoon. And those nachos were at no cost. So that snacks and stuff like that. Now, you mentioned a meal. So one thing we're doing again this year from MASONICon 2022 that we did a couple times before that's really exciting is I said, what would happen if we had a table lodge at MASONICon? So when we had Friday activities, they were capped with, and I believe I coined the phrase, a grand table lodge. And somebody says, well, what's a grand table lodge? And I said, it's a table lodge run by the Grand Master. And that's all it was. And the grand officers would actually go through the ceremony, and it was open to the ladies and families. And that was a big success. The one year it was done, that came out of the budget. This year from MASONICon 2022, there is going to be a cost, but it's going to be aimed at cheaper costs for couples. We're trying to make it a couple event. So the brothers can bring their partners and everybody, and that's going to be Friday.
Okay, that's going to be on Friday. Okay. And I think we're at about 7:40. Mark or Silva, do you have any questions for Adam? You've been sitting here listening. I've seen a lot of nodding going on. Any input on your stuff that you want to ask about? I guess not. Anybody else got any questions? Is there any questions in the chat?
Hey, Mark, while they're thinking, I was hoping you'd grab
dates.
it. Yes,
dates.
MASONICon 2022.
You have a flyer to put up on the screen.
I do not have a flyer to put up on the screen.
Oh, no. Hold on a second. Let's make one.
Okay. And while you're doing that, it's going to be July 29th and 30th in person. So July 29th is going to be the table lodge.
July 29
the
and
organizers
30.
have decided not to do classes on Friday, focus on the table lodge, the grand table lodge. That's going to be that night because it's going to require quite a bit of prep. And then Saturday is going to have multi-tracks. It's like 5 or 6 tracks all day. It's going to end around 4 or 5. And you've noticed that all these things we've been talking about how the event's grown over the years, instead of saying that they occurred accidentally, I'll say they occurred serendipitously. When these events take on an energy of their own, things happen. And one of the things that's happening this year is the Shrine is having an outing to the local baseball game. And they were looking for time to do it. And we said, why not do it Saturday after MASONICon is over?
Did I spell Albuquerque correct?
You did.
Oh, good. At least maybe the spell checker got it for me.
The autocorrect got you.
The autocorrect got me. Good.
Well done.
Good.
Well done. And so now we have this event that's, we've got a grand table lodge on Friday night. We've got this great event, multi-track approach on Saturday. And then when we're done, we're going to the ball game. We're going to hang out. We're going to get even more fellowship and bringing our families with us as well. And that's fun. And that's going to be coordinated by the Shrine. So whenever we work together, it's always going to be better.
We do have a question in the chat. How do you handle lodging?
So generally, you're on your own, except that we did have a committee do the research on various hotels, and we did get a few group discount rates. So some of the years we got the discount rates, some of the years that we did not. There was one year that we actually had a Mason who was a manager of a hotel system, so we got a little bit of a group rate there. So other than trying to get deals on hotels, folks are kind of on their own. But we do our best to find a place. Okay, go ahead and capitalize the ASONI.
Okay.
And the C, Masonic. Yeah.
Is that the styling?
That's the way we do it here in New Mexico, yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. Any other questions anybody got any other questions?
So I guess as a lady, my question is, what are the things to do during that multi-track on Saturday for, do they tend to show up to the non-Masonic things if they're coming as a couple? Do they show up in that track? What else do they do? And what does that look like?
That's a great question. Most
others?
of the classes are not tiled. Some of them might be, but we really work to make sure that they are not tiled. And that way our ladies and our families might be able to come and enjoy some of the classes. And also, if we have non-Masons come, then there's something we can use to engage them as well. So there's a few tiled classes, but that's one thing that we focus on, is making sure there's some untiled classes. There was one year that we had a track dedicated to ladies. And we were like, and somebody said, we don't know what we're doing. And I said, that's right. That's why we're not going to do it. We're going to have the ladies run their own track. And so we had Eastern Star and Amaranth put together what they thought the ladies would like to see. And of course, it was a super secret opportunity for them to promote their organizations to our ladies.
Yeah.
So that's, so I'm not sure what our planners this year have in mind, but I know that a number of the classes will not be tiled. And of course, like I said, much to my surprise, that class on Robert's Rules of Order that I taught had a bunch of ladies and older youth in it, since they use Robert's Rules, and none of their Masonic sponsors knew a way to teach them how to do it.
Great. So what do you think is one of the most unusual talks or presentations that you've had done at one of your MASONICons?
We're going to actually have it again this year. We've got a guy who he's going to give a 2-part lecture. So 2 hours on Masonry and the Kabalah.
Okay.
So like I said, we've got leadership classes, and then we also have other things. And this definitely comes
on the
under
esoteric end of things.
I
can say on the practical end, I typically go out and it's nuts and bolts, lodge operations and secretarial stuff. And then you've got the, Sam coming out and talking about millennials and Freemasonry. And it is, I think, if anybody's thinking about doing one of these, that you want to have your tracks. I don't know if you work on this, Adam. Do you have your tracks have themes?
When we can.
When you can. Okay.
When we can. We group them together so that classes that could be of similar interest to folks are not opposite each other.
Right. In the scheduling. Right. And, it really does run the whole gamut from really that really nuts and bolts stuff to, I went to one talk about, Egyptian symbology and Freemasonry, and it was like, have we borrowed from Egyptian tradition, that type of thing. And I think I've only been to one event that required being a Master Mason at a MASONICon.
When you said, what's one of the most unusual classes you've got, was, well, we have this one guy who he came up with a class on the social consciousness of unionism by Carl Jung, and comparing that with Freemasonic philosophy. He was one of our Friday speakers. And I said, so this is going to be on Carl Jung and Freemasonry. He said, yes. And I said, I beg you, please let me name this class. I told him what it was, and he said, go for it. So this class comparing Jungian psychology with Freemasonry was called The Young and the Restless. I love humor. Humor, if you looked at some of the titles, some of them were kind of quirky, like, I'm a past master, now what? Or I'm not an officer, who cares? And so those titles get people's attention. So how to build a lodge budget. Okay. Those are necessary things we have to have. So find ways.
But you name that one. Oh my God, we're going broke.
See, something like that, something attention getting, something that'll make people go, huh? Because when you promote it and you advertise it, again, remember I said familiarity? People scan looking for the things that attract them. Humor is attractive, meaning is attractive, and fraternity is attractive.
Yeah. it's one of the things that I really took away from it myself, having been a couple times, is that there is kind of a sense of irreverence about it, of like let's strip the formality away and let's get down to the meat of the matter. Let's get the ceremony out, kind of get that stuff out so we can talk about the real essential stuff. And the other one I want you to talk about, and maybe you don't get to experience as much, but the hallway track, because it's the track no one talks about. And I know I met in the hallway track, which is just wandering around talking to people, maybe skip a session and see who's there. I've had some amazing conversations with brothers. That's where I met one of my secretaries in Nebraska years before he ever became a software user, was in the hallway track. And maybe Adam has the chance because he's usually busy when he's at MASONICon. But I've been in that hallway track, and because it is in this informal setting, you really can sit down and have those conversations and have that networking and have that stuff happen, almost as valuable as the formal tracks are.
One of the requests for a change that we got from one of the brothers, we actually ignored, but the fact that the request was made was meaningful. One of the requests, like I said, a couple people said, well, we want less classes. Well, we weren't going to do that. But one of the other things was, we want more social time. We want longer breaks than 10 minutes. We want more. And of course we said, well, we don't want to reduce the core. So we made sure to increase the fraternity, the sessions, like towards the end of the day with the nachos, very social opportunities when nachos hit the table. We made sure that the bar and the shrine opened around 4 o'clock. So people will stay in that social
And there
atmosphere.
were nachos there too.
Yes, there were. And these were heavy nachos. These were like, the kitchen went nuts, heavy nachos. And of course, the development of the Grand Table Lodge provides an amazing fraternal aspect so it's that concept of the hallway session that is expanded to more and more opportunities for Freemasonry. And I think the greatest thing that could be said about anything, whether it's the classes or the opportunity to engage, is I wish there had been more.
Yes.
Always leave people wanting more.
Always leave people wanting a little bit more. Yeah. Okay.
That was what I was going to say, is all of a sudden it changes the game when people keep saying, I want more, and they'll find those opportunities in the corners. They'll find those opportunities in the spaces between. Even if they want more of it, it means they're going to say, this was a great event. I want to come back next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
age demographics, where do you see your attendees? Do you get demographics on who they are, like in the follow-up feedback?
That's really interesting. We've never actually asked on the feedback forms for folks to identify their age. So that's very interesting. We were using what I had a research professor called the monocular stress test. And the monocular stress test is when you eyeball the group and see what things look like. So we were noticing that I would say overall younger generations. We really were looking at that. Now, I'm not saying we didn't have representation from all generations, because our lodges from across the state has representation of all generations. We have masters in their 80s, not too many of those, and we've got a few masters in their 20s. So, but we noticed though that most of the attendees at MASONICon were younger. And when I say younger, at the time, 50 is younger. But we also, but we also saw 20s, 30s, 40s. So I don't know if that was because we were doing something new, and so new appeals to newer generations, or the average age of our officer lines has been going down.
It is definitely inching down. Yes, I'll agree with that. And I don't think that's just a New Mexico phenomenon. I think that is I think there is some movement in that way, pretty much across the fraternity.
So with different generational approaches, one question that comes up is, so why don't we just do this online? Why are we having everybody travel from across the state? Let's just do everything online. And during COVID, we had 2 years where MASONICon was entirely virtual and it was one track. And so numbers dropped down to 90, although it was still better than the 50 when people said, oh, we have too many tracks. Oh, just go with less tracks. So for those of you thinking about it, what we've done in other situations and other groups that I work with is you could do it electronically with a multi-track approach if you had, it could be difficult. One option is different sign-ins for different classes, and then you're bouncing back and forth. That can be tricky. And the other one is having somebody put you in different breakout rooms. So if you're having 7 tracks, that means there's 7 breakout rooms. If you're going to do that, then that means you need a tech team of at least 5 or maybe 1 per every track that you have at the very least. So yes, it can be done, but remember that what you lose is that getting together.
Yes.
So if somebody says, could it be done electronically? It could, but do that gap analysis. What do we gain? What do we lose? What is our primary goal? Right now in New Mexico, our primary goal is we want to get together. We had the strongest stay-at-home orders in the country, and our mask mandate only ended in March, just last March. So we are desperate to get together without masks and in full fellowship. So there's been no questions about online yet.
Great. So one last question I got for you. If someone was going to undertake this, what do you think a minimum size for like an organizing committee is?
I laugh because I remember something a mentor told me years ago. He said, count the number of members in your organization, and miraculously, that's the number of jobs there are to do. Now, that being said, I like agile committees. So 8, 10, figure out what the jobs are. You know what? We're going to need a tech person. Now, when I say tech person, I mean a dude, an individual in charge of the other tech people he has helping them, that your team members are actually team leaders. So when I say a committee of 7, or 7 or 10, what I really mean is 7 or 10 bosses who will then put together. So you might have, this person's going to be in charge of food. Of course, he's not cooking it or all of it. Someone else will, but he's coordinating it. Somebody to do tech who has a bunch of little tech people helping that person out. Somebody who's doing logistics, the person who knows that we're going to have to bring 5 extension cords and 3 vacuum cleaners from our house. And then the class coordinator and that kind of thing. So now, let's say you have a grand jurisdiction that has some regional identities. Then you're going to want to make sure that every region is represented. If you leave one out, then you've reduced the chances that the other folks in their region will travel to your event. So sometimes take a look at representation. Who you want represented there. Who's your target audience? Make sure they have a voice.
Great. Okay. Last words of wisdom before we run.
I want to encourage anybody, every Mason, everybody to consistently ask themselves, as a Mason, I really wish we had more. And it doesn't mean that the question is criticizing Masonry. It recognizes that perfect Masonry is about continual progress. Masonry is a progressive science, some of you have heard. So we can always go from good to better, better to great, and great to fantastic. I never would have thought of that. So continue. And I believe that every Mason is a leader. We are teaching you how to lead and how to communicate, which means I want every single one of you to find out who else you can train, you can mentor, and then any obstacles that you find, develop an educational event that will address those opportunities for improvement. Do it. You're Masons. Nothing can stop you.
Great. Thank you for your time, Adam. This has been awesome. So everyone, have a great evening. And do we have a training this Saturday? Great. So we'll see folks 10 a.m. this Saturday. We've got it. That's 10 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll see people at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Adam, again, thanks for coming out. This was amazing. Our first time doing this kind of format. Really appreciate you joining us here. You got us started. Now we just got to go find some more guests and speakers to come on. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
And we do plan to post this on YouTube. If
yes, this is going to be on YouTube.
Join us. And this was great. Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everyone.